Good morning, frothers, and welcome back to another episode here at Wheatlow Brewery. And we're going to do another brew day, and inspired by our visit to Hoddy and Maverick Brewing, he's very kindly given us the recipe to his flagship beer, which is Big Bird, 6.3% hazy beer, and it's his best-selling beer. And but he's got a bit of a challenge in the brewing this beer. The challenge being that he used a yeast called Hop Unlock from WHC, and this is, I think, a version of saturated yeast with a enzyme added to help with the thiolizing of the hops during fermentation. Now, unfortunately, WHC have had some problems with this yeast and discontinued it, but it was absolutely central to the Big Bird recipe. So Hoddy's given me a recipe of what he thinks he'd like to try. I don't know the exact difference between this and the original Big Bird recipe, but I think he may have added some Nelson to try and get those sort of white winey, thiolizy taste that you can sometimes get. So he's added a bit more Nelson, I'm not sure if it had Nelson in or not to start with, actually, but certainly the one we've got has. So the idea is I'm going to brew this with just plain saturated, and we're going to see if it comes out anywhere near the real Big Bird. I have got a can of Big Bird, I think, in the fridge, which is a collector's item now because he hasn't brewed it. He's got none left himself, so hopefully we can compare that. So this is a hazy beer. It's a big beer. It's strong for me. It's very different to all the traditional ales I've been doing recently. We're going to use Golden Promise, which is Hoddy's favourite malt, is 77.3%. Malted oats for that hazy effect and the nice pillowy mouthfeel. And malted oats from Simpsons are really great because they've got the husks inside the mixture, so that means you don't have to worry about adding a filtration agent like rice hulls or what have you. So that's 12.7%. Bit of wheat malt for head retention and haze as well, 6%, and a bit of Simpsons dextrin malt or carapils at 4%. And we're also going to mash hop 55 grams, so quite a small amount of mash hopping of Cascade. Cascade's the number one hop for mash hopping. Must have the most useful bits for the thiolizing effect, and the mash enzyme should help with that. But Hoddy says don't need to go mad on them, less is more was the phrase he used. And then we've got a water profile that I'll go into in a minute, which is high in chlorides, low in sulfates. And then we're putting a tiny touch of Magnum at the start of the boil, just 1 IBU. And then we're waiting all the way until the Whirlpool, which we're going to do at a low temp of 76 degrees Celsius. And we've got 8.1 IBUs of Citra, 7 IBUs of Idaho 7, and 4 IBUs of Nelson, which gives us about 20 IBUs nominally, just under 20 IBUs. So I think we'll get probably a bit more bitterness than that out of it, especially with an enormous dry hop, which we'll do after fermentation, which is, I'll put that on the screen in terms of grams per litre, but it's a great big dry hop, probably as big as I've ever done, let's see, at least 10 grams per litre, over 10 grams per litre of dry hop. Consisting of Strata, Nelson, Idaho 7 and Citra. We're going to ferment it with WHC saturated. You could use a similar yeast like Verdant. We're going to ferment it fully out and then cool it to 14 degrees, dump the yeast, then add the dry hop, rouse it, leave it on the dry hop for 2 to 3 days, and then drop the hops out, and then we can package the beer. I hope I can do this beer justice and make something nice. Whether this recipe will be what Hoddy goes to for the exact tweak to Big Bird for the future, I'm not sure. That depends very much on whether he likes it when he tastes it. So we'll see all that later in the video of course we'll do tasting, and we'll see if we've got anywhere near with this beer. Right, the water profile for Big Bird is definitely looks different to my normal kind of water profile because it's a hazy beer, and we're pushing the chlorides way above the sulfates. So Hoddy's given me his water profile, and I can tell it's different straight away because the biggest item is always listed first on Beersmith, and the biggest item is salt, sodium chloride. So it's 35 parts per million sulfates and 187 chloride. So what's that? It's about 5-to-1 ratio. And the reason for that is that you want your hops to be soft and not harsh in the bitterness, and you want the fruitiness out of them rather than the harsh bitterness. And you also want to emphasise the malt and the mouthfeel and the oats and things like that. So that's what we're doing here. No bicarbs in it at all. So I'll weigh the rest of these out and we'll get them in. So I've got my water salts measured out, and we're also going to be mash hopping this beer. Cascade is just your number one hop for mash hopping. Seems to have the correct precursors or whatever, correct properties to make mash hopping good, which means that you're helping with the thiols and things like that. So the idea of mash hopping is that by putting hops in the mash, which we never normally do, you're exposing them to the enzymes that are naturally in the grain, and they're changing a few things. As you can see, I don't know everything about this. They're changing a few things in the hops that will help the thiols emerge later when it interacts with the yeast. So now, according to Hoddy, less is more with mash hopping. So we're going quite steady with 55 grams of Cascade, and we're going to mash that in with all the grains. Super. Right, just measured the pH about 5.6. So I'm going to put some lactic acid in, 44 ml. Super, let's go put this in then. Right, with all the open fermentation we've been doing recently on the trad beers, some of the videos I've put on Instagram in particular, brewers from particularly America have said that they think I'm mad and I'm going to oxidise the beer and so on. And for this kind of beer that we're doing today, that is a real fear. So much so that I'm going to actually add some vitamin C, ascorbic acid to the mash. I'm going to put 7 grams in the mash just to help reduce the chances of oxidation, and then obviously when we ferment it we're going to be really careful about any oxygen ingress. The tank's going to be fully sealed. It's the complete opposite of what we've been doing, and it's amazing the difference in these beers and how differently you can treat them, or must treat them, in order to avoid oxidation in this case, and actually add oxygen to the yeast for the trad beers. So amazing difference, and you learn something every day, brewers. There's a different beer, different technique. Right, I've got the first hop addition, and look at that. That is paltry, isn't it? 5 grams of Magnum, just a token amount, maybe to stop it boiling over perhaps. 1 IBU. Going in now. Right, so there's a tiny touch of hops at the start of the boil, barely worth putting in I suppose, but for the Whirlpool we've got quite a big addition. We've got Citra, Idaho 7 and Nelson, and I've got some of this Lupo Core Citra, which is supposed to be super duper. It's 15% alpha acid. So I'm going to just recalculate the number of grams according to this alpha acid for all the hops, and then I'm going to put them in a jug, and then we're going to whirlpool them at 76 for 40 minutes. So I'll get on with that now. And we've got some pretty nice smells here. Nelson Sauvin. I just looked up the descriptors for Idaho 7 because it smells amazing. So it says, released in 2015, known for its punchy tropical citrus and pine notes, often described as tangerine, mango and marmalade with a hint of black tea. So certainly smells complex and amazing. So stick them in there. 2, 3, 7. I'd imagine that the citrus smells pretty amazing as well. And I've just crushed them then. They're really soft and crumble really easily, and that's a good sign of a quality and freshness in the hops. Smells amazing. I've got a bit of a cold and I can still smell them. So right, I'm going to measure the dry hop out as well now, whilst I've got all the same hops out. So I've got the Idaho 7 in there, and then I've got some really special Nelson from Garston Hops. A friend of mine, Malt, went to New Zealand, actually went to Garston Hops and picked these up fresh from there, and brought them back in a cool box in his suitcase. So thanks to Malt, I've got some very nice Nelson here. So let's give them a sniff. Yeah, they smell amazing. So what I'm going to do is bag these all up now, because these are for the dry hop, which will be, I don't know, a week's time or more. It just means it's easy to do the dry hop. I already got the hops out now, and then if I'm just doing it on a school night or something, I can just get my bag out, quickly put them in, instead of it being a bigger job. Just makes it easier when you're coming in doing quick little jobs in the week. So I'll put these back in the cool room, somewhere near the door, and that'll just be handy for when the dry hop time comes. Right, it's been a bit of a long brew day. I did accidentally oversparge when I got distracted, which means I've had to have quite a long boil to get the gravity to where it should be, which is 1065. I have now done that, but I've been boiling it for probably over 2 hours now, and I haven't put any Protafloc in this time because I've got such a good hot break from that long boil. I don't think it needs it. Almost at risk of clarifying the whole beer with all these this long boil time and so on. So hopefully it'll be okay. I've now got it at 76 degrees and I'm whirlpooling it nice and gently with all those Whirlpool hops, and the smell is absolutely unbelievable. Beautiful smells coming out of there. So that's quite exciting. And as soon as this is finished spinning, which I'm going to give it half an hour spinning and then 10-minute rest, there's another 12 minutes to go, and I'll let it rest, and then we'll transfer it to the FV, and then we'll add saturated yeast, and we'll add some ALDC as well, and then we'll tuck it up and see how we get on. Super. Right, I'm going to put some ALDC in this spear, alpha acetolactate decarboxylase, which is an enzyme that will help prevent the production of diacetyl, which we don't want, of course, in the spear. And I need 2.6 grams, so not much. This bottle's going to last me a fair while, isn't it? Right, I've got the yeast, got the beer in here, and it's quite a big pitcher of yeast, 200 grams of saturated, which is 1.5 grams per litre. So I'll just whip that in now. And I get the ALDC, pour that in. So the spunding valve's set at no pressure, so hopefully we'll just see the activity coming through there. Great, well that's set at 20 degrees now, it's 19 at the moment, so we'll see how that's going in the morning, and hopefully it doesn't overflow and splat into my open fermentation. In fact, I might just move it a bit further away. I don't think it will, really. Super. Brew day done. Right, the big bird's finished fermenting. I've cooled it to 14 degrees. I dumped the cone last night. I'm just going to dump it again now as a double check, and then we can get the dry hop in. So I've got a little bit of pressure in the tank, just enough to move the needle up. I don't want much, but I don't want negative pressure to cause a bubble of air to go in. So I'm just going to trying to get the yeast out, and there is a bit of yeast coming out, so I'm glad I've done it twice. Just do it really steady so it doesn't punch a hole through the yeast at the bottom. Alright, looks like beer now. There we are. Super. Right, I've got my hops that I measured out on brew day for this Big Bird dry hop. So this is a sealed packet, so I don't need to worry about that in terms of oxygen, but this one I'm just going to try give it a bit of a flush with some CO2, because there'll be a bit of air between the pellets. Might sound a bit over the top, but bear in mind a teaspoonful of air can ruin a beer like this. CO2 is heavier than air, so if I leave it open at the top, hopefully it's the air that will come out. Oh, it smells amazing. Right, so seal that up for now. And now what I need to do is get some CO2 to come in from the bottom. So let's see if you can just see. I've got my carbonation stone there. So a bit of sanitizer on it. And I've only got low pressure, maybe 5 psi. Release the pressure from here. Rip this 4-inch port off. CO2's on. Clock's ticking for it to flare up, froth up. I've got a bit of headspace there. So I'm just keeping an eye on it in case it suddenly froths right up. If your beer's really fizzy, fermentation's really active, if it's warm, these kind of things can all cause it to go very Vesuvian when you pour a dry hop in. The surface area of the hop pellets is giving 1 million nucleation points for the CO2 to go mad. So I can just see in there a little bit. Let me film it so you can see it. Seems to be stable. A little bit of froth, look, and you can see the CO2 coming up. So I think this is constantly overflowing with CO2, so therefore we should be good. And this is the strata. That's good. Quick squirt. Lid on. Bit more gas. Make sure it's all purged out. Sealing up. Open that, and then we can give it some high pressure bursts, rumbles if you like, to mix it in. So up to 40 psi, just on and off, on and off. And that will create a real swirl in the tank to mix those hops in before they sink to the bottom. And now I'll just build the pressure up to about 1 bar. Although this is in all different measurements. I think that's 0.667 megapascals, is it? I don't know. Looks about right. So, get the gas off. And I'll rumble that another couple of times the next day or two. I'll make a note now what date and time I've added the hops, and we'll give it about 48 hours on them. See what it's like later. So this is homemade big chicken, and I've got a collector's item here, which is a can.
I think now, after this, I've got the last can in my fridge at home.
Well, I've got another one.
Have you?
I don't know how.
So this is our best-selling beer by Country Malt. And that's tap room, trade, can, everything. You need to give that a swirl. That's been sat in the fridge for a while.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right.
Go on, you do the honours, son.
Yeah, go on then. Oh, hello. That's the one thing I'll say with quite a few of these stylized yeasts is if they're left for a while, they'll drop right.
Okay.
Because the new one that WHC tried to replace it with, literally the kegs, if you leave a keg unattended for 3 or 4 days, it's bright. And we now have an SOP in the brewery. Every Thursday before we serve on a Friday, you have to go in and roll the kegs.
Okay.
Because otherwise they're just bright.
That's actually a thing in hazies, isn't it? Stability of your haze.
We've got some beers, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But then we've got some, and it's the yeast, and it will just literally, you turn your back for 2 minutes and it's drop right.
We're lucky with design, I think.
That's mine, and that's Hobby's.
It's stable. Well, that was Lalman Verdant.
Verdant, yeah. Which is a
ton of small tables.
yeah.
So, in your right hand is the homebrew,
Left is Big
left
Bird.
is the real one.
Right, so
So I'm a touch darker. I was expecting that after my 3-hour boil after my steak. And it's very slightly unfair because the can's a bit old.
yeah, but that is Big Bird. 100% that's Big Bird. Hides the alcohol really well. It's got it's that winey, grapey kind of thing going on to it.
The first sense I got was a bit lemony, but it's actually,
Yes.
Is it?
It's that kind of slightly winey, grapey kind of thing going on.
Yeah. Tart fruit. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the whole thiol thing, which I can't get the yeast for anymore.
So you tweaked the recipe slightly. The recipe you gave me, you've added what? Nelson, is it?
So what we tried to do is use another yeast that does have some documented thiol releasing capability, so saturated that you've used. It's not a bread thiol releasing yeast, but it does document as having some capability for it. Then, so you've mash hopped it with Cascade like we do with Big Bird.
Yeah.
But then we've tried to replace some of that white, winey, grapey kind of thing with using Nelson in the Whirlpool and the dry hop. Which it kind of does,
Yeah.
but it's not. You can kind of tell there's more dry hop to it.
So yours has got kind of a longer finish.
But that's what the thiol yeast kind of brings to it. It just imparts this flavour and aroma in it that.
I think they're both nice.
But that's the daft thing is that's nice, but is it that? And that's the thing we had with the replacement yeast WHC gave us. They're like, use this. It's exactly the same. Straight away, all my brew team, me, Kirsty, Charlie, straight away. That's not Big Bird.
Could you add a thiolizing enzyme or something like that?
Maybe. That might be the next thing we try. So we talked about this, Rich, about trying this because physically can't buy the yeast. They've discontinued it because Paul from WHC said it wasn't being consistent enough at a commercial level. So the way it performed, it had variability, which for them, commercialised is just not tolerable. They just need it to do the same thing every time. So they changed it, and the yeast they changed it to, it looks like it's very consistent, but it's not that.
Yeah.
And the thiol thing seems to be losing popularity.
Yeah,
It was a massive thing for a while, bit like I used to say Brute IPA. It was like everyone's doing it, and then it's just kind of like annoyingly.
Now everyone wants cask.
Which is fine, but actually I think we developed quite a good beer there.
Yep.
And I need to find a way to kind of get it back.
You need to get your homebrew kit out.
Yeah.
Because it's
And that's more boozy than that.
yeah. So Rich, you got to own up on the ABV.
So yeah, mine finished at 6.7.
I think because whether that's mash temple or something, but you can tell the difference because of the.
But you boiled it for a long time, yeah?
I boiled it for a long time because I
Look
thought.
back.
I boiled it. Why did I boil it for a long time? I can't remember whether I got distracted or I oversparred. I think I oversparred.
Yeah, I think you said something was going on. You had to attend to something.
So my OG was correct. It's just attenuating more.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So whether your mash was a bit low, spice a bit long, therefore it dragged the temperature down a bit.
Yeah.
Just reminds me how good Big Good is. It makes me like I need to make this because we don't have it on tap and we get asked for it all the time.
But do you think customers would notice the difference? I know you might, but if you gave them this,
I think actually with a bit more development, I think we could get close to this.
I think it could, yeah. I mean, with a bit better execution, perhaps. Get the right strand, for example.
I think
it might be that saturated would need a bit of adjustment. We might have to change the OG a bit.
yeah, and maybe I'm using Haze Heaven a lot at the moment, so because that is a bit bigger, it's a bit thicker, it doesn't attenuate as much. So maybe you could drive a bit more body into the beer with that, a bit more stable haze because Haze Heaven is very more stable, and just play around. Play around with the hops a bit more. I think with the Nelson idea, it's kind of getting there. Do you know what I mean? I think you just might need to play around with it a little bit.
Yeah, and you can get that flavour you're looking for from Nelson, can't you? Because you have to be careful not to overdo it because it can go very winey.
Yeah. But you can definitely. I had a little taste of this when I came by on Sunday before I had to go somewhere else for work, but you can tell there's the Nelson in there, which is getting close to the character of that. I think if you just it needs some more. We're going to have to brew it again next week.
Yeah, I think we will.
That's what I'm saying.
I brew a beer called Sweet Release that used their Sweet Release yeast, and that also has been discontinued, and that was also thiolized, probably for the same reason. And was most disappointing because I've always had success with that beer.
Yeah, and same for us as well. That's the thing I did say to WC about was what was it that was causing inconsistencies, because for us it's been consistent. So there's something going on somewhere that's giving that variability.
And they won't give you the formula like saturated plus such and such an enzyme or what.
The new one is exactly that.
Right.
So the new replacement for it, what have they called it? It's not thiol theory, it's thiol theory. So it was hop and lock, it's now thiol theory. It's saturated with an enzyme in it.
And what about some of the others do sort of thiolizing yeast as well, don't they? Fermenters do.
Well,
but is that more of a lager yeast? The new one?
it is,
I'm a
yes.
45 or something.
I'm not up to speed with it. I'm a cask fermenters. File what?
Yeah.
What? No,
So
I don't know.
I've looked at this, and fermenters do a thiol lager yeast, but they do it dry. So part of the thing with this is I suspect that also this hop and lock wouldn't dry successfully. Because I've got another problem with another beer that I make a yeast with that wouldn't dry, that WC have discontinued, because it's not commercially viable for them because they can't dry it. I suspect there's an element of that going on here as well. And is it that type of yeast that won't dry, and they've happened the Pastorianus for the lager will dry successfully rather than Saccharomyces cerevisiae. I don't know, but
You need to invite them down.
Well, they've been.
Have they? So you see, well, you should need to invite them down again.
I don't think Paul would like it if I cornered him about this. I think really too much.
In fact, I sent him an invitation tonight just in case, because I know he deals with this.
Yeah.
But talking of cask yeast, though, Andy, I've had a super adventure with these traditional yeasts. I went to this tour I've been doing. I went to Hub Norton, and they gave me their yeast.
That's amazing. I love
And it
that.
was absolutely amazing yeast. And we went to Donington, which is nearby, which is a very traditional watermill powered brewery. And there, they've got the yeast in a grubby yellow bucket. It was white when it was born. And he's got like his thumbs inside it, and he's just saying, "Yeah, here's the yeast." And it's absolutely proper, but it's just so dominant in its own will because there's so much of it. And it
Just
froths
crowds
it,
everything
you
else
harvest
out.
it, You use it again, and it's every single one's flopped over the top of the vessel, even though I've taken like a fifth of it out to make sure that didn't happen.
Amazing.
Brilliant. And then, so then I've been trying to do other beers in that traditional way, fully open, no lid at all. Landlord, Theakston's. The Theakston's you had earlier, you had a taste of that. That was open fermentation. And then I've had a real cask of Theakston's, so I've harvested the yeast on that. Worked that up. So,
Did you? Interesting.
So that'll be good as well. But and I wished I could have got the Harvey's yeast because that is
But he won't. He won't let that go.
And well, what I do know is they do. Even though he won't let it go, if you're right, they do an imperial stout and they put it in a tank and for a year. And after so long, their yeast dies, if you like, but the fermentation kicks off again because there's another subculture, minor culture in there.
Like a Brettanomyces kind of
It's
thing.
not. I've got the name written down. It's in Latin. But I looked it up, and it's the kind of yeast that goes on the outside of a saucisson, or like the white powder.
Yeah.
So I can just imagine somebody in the 50s at Harvey's having a sausage for lunch and then
dropping
handling
it.
the
Oh damn it! There it's gone now.
But it's proper, and Harvey's tastes completely unique just because of the yeast. You wouldn't ever. I haven't even tried to brew it yet because what's the point without their yeast? It's
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, it's one of those. Yeast is one of those elements of brewing that gets forgotten about a lot. People focus on hops primarily, and then malt and all this sort of stuff, but actually, the yeast can just do so much.
There's nothing wrong with pitch and ditch and stick. And it's good for us, isn't it? We put it in. We know it's going to work. It's reliable. But when you see these traditional breweries, so they've got. Most of them have got some kind of Heath Robinson funnel that they've got suspended above the wall. And they have a massive krausen that's still
And it just
it's not a krausen like
overflows,
that, it's a krausen like that. And so they lower this funnel in, and all the yeast, which heavy, solid yeast, goes in the froth on top and just stays there, even after fermentation. It's heavy stuff on top. And then they lower this funnel, and it goes down, and it splatters out the ceiling in the room below through a pipe like that. And they've got an old 1960s stainless steel, just after stainless steel was invented, they made a trolley, and they put it underneath, and it splatters into it. And then they wheel it into a cold room with no lid on, and then the next day they put it in the next
And then they
bin.
just jug it out into the
incredible.
next bit. Yeah. Like I say, it's truly amazing.
And there's no. I think they must do some lab work on it, but it doesn't look like doing a lot.
The lab work will be them tasting it, going, "Does this taste right?"
And I even asked him if he got it backed up somewhere, and he said he hadn't.
Oh, really? Oh, my God.
He said they nearly lost it in COVID, which some breweries did, didn't
Yeah, because they...
Was it
Bateman's or a few realised they needed to just brew and ditch because they needed, because if they didn't, the yeast was just going to die. I mean, I'm a bit annoyed. I've toyed with the idea of building a yeast spring and getting into repitching a few times, and I'm annoyed. I should have saved the yeast for that.
Yeah.
Somebody will have a sachet of it somewhere, won't they?
Well, they've got like basically slopes of it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Huck Norton do. Every 3 months they get a slope and they work up the whole yeast again, start from scratch, and to keep it fresh. And they do 12 generations or something like that.
So that's what
12, they'll do 12 before they pitch new.
Yeah.
that's one of the things I've been toying with, and there's a few videos on YouTube if you're interested around how to grow your own yeast in like a Firmzilla all-rounder.
Yeah.
Inject oxygen, grow it, and then to get to a pitchable volume.
The Bridge, they use that kind of a yeast, and they do 12 generations, but it's not. That doesn't mean they do 12 brews and then get new yeast. It's 12 generations. So if they harvest one and pitch it into 5 beers,
That's one generation.
So
Yeah, of course.
it lasts them so many months, 3 months, I think it was.
So yeah, I mean that's
I've not played with that. I'm a fresh brick every brew.
pitch and ditch. There's nothing wrong with pitch and ditch.
I think one of the
Paranoid
criteria
about
for it is
consistency.
you need to be brewing every day or every other day at least. Don't you?
That's the problem. If I did do that with Big Bird, we're not big enough. We don't sell enough of it.
So you need that diet. I mean, I couldn't do it. I've tried to keep the Huck Norton one going, but it did peter out after about 5 beers.
Really?
But luckily I took some slopes before that. But I'm no lab yeast man. I don't know if those slopes will be alright.
Yeah, I mean there are ways you can get a hemocytometer, so get the right slips and the base plate and the microscopes. I have done that at times when I've been worried about how good the fermentation is. And yet you can count yeast cells, make sure you've got enough, and you can also spot any Brett in there because Brett looks very different to healthy yeast. Oh yeah, you can spot it's a wiggly worm versus a round healthy thing. So, but that's only if you you taste something you're like, this doesn't taste quite right, and then you can have a look just to satisfy your own mind.
How far we've come from like 1300s, 1400s in Germany, where they just used to stir it with the magic stick.
I say the lucky paddle, wasn't it? Yeah, the lucky paddle.
Yeast? What is yeast? You stir it with the magic stick and then you get
In
beer.
England they called it God is good or God is great or something like that because they believed that was the hand of God touching the beer. I mean, it's hard to argue with.
And then you got your guy stirring it with a pepperami or whatever it was.
I use that example in the homebrew, well, the sort of the brewery tour, and I talk about where yeast come from, and I talk about the lucky paddle. I mean, that's the thing. They just we hang it on the corner of the brewery. We do this, we stir it with that, and magically beer happens. But it's a long way we've come. Look at homebrewers worrying about water quality and
don't take the lid off your fermenter. You're going to kill your beer.
Don't look at it. Is this okay?
When I put a video on Instagram of the open fermentation,
the one where you were doing
and I was
jugging
jugging
that.
it.
Even I was like,
there was serious proper brewers, particularly from America, saying that you can do that. It's only a matter of time before you get an infection.
That was 500 years sound.
Grumps. So, well, it opened my eyes. I think it's absolutely amazing. I think it develops the flavour of the beer better. It finishes it attenuates better. The yeast health's better because every time it gets oxygen, the yeast reproduces it. So it stops as soon as it's in the CO2 only environment. So it can only be a good thing, really.
Which is what I've been learning about yeast propagation. Is actually if you feed it oxygen, it doesn't try to ferment and produce alcohol. It goes, I need to reproduce. So that's with building this thing to grow my own yeast. I'm thinking, well, maybe it's possible. But the brewery that I worked at when I was 16, we had open top fermenters. Everything was open top. Like 4, maybe 5. I just remember these big frothy things pouring over the side.
That's what it does.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I've got no idea what yeast it was at the time. But, so yeah, that is a really good, I'm not going to say attempt, but helping us to get back to where that beer, Big Bird, should be. That's weirdly taught me a lot.
So you've now tasted that then, which is using your Nelson and using Saturated. I think I'm sensing you want to try it with Haze Heaven.
Yes.
What other things might you try?
I'm going to nick some of Andy's because he's not going to drink. He's driving.
I'm done.
I'm weirdly thinking Nelson and maybe a little bit of Columbus in there.
Really?
Because there is a slightly kind of...
Is that the dankiness?
Yeah. And maybe a bigger dry hop with Strata. Because I think we can have a go at that and just see if we can really... More dry hop, more Strata, because I know all this weird hazy stuff is new to you, Rich, so...
Yeah, well, I'm like Andy, I'm a bit out of my comfort zone in Hazeland.
But then, to be honest, I'm finding
You've
my...
done it as well, haven't
It's under protest.
I'm finding my way in the cask world, right? I mean, you know, we're up to like beer number 5 now in the cask world, so slowly dialing it in. But I think we can really work towards that. I think.
But you won't need a 3-hour boil.
Yeah, that'll break the bank from an electricity perspective. I don't think I'd quite be able to afford that.
Cheers. Well, we'll switch off then, but thanks for coming.
Awesome. 3 YouTubing brewers all in the same room at the same time.
We're better all herded together, aren't we? Less we do damage to the world.
Amazing.
Awesome. Ale.